morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for us to begin. So I want to welcome all of you. I especially want to welcome all of our honored veterans. We're so pleased to have you. This is your day. We thank you for being here. I also want to welcome our President Emeritus, Shirley Morgan, and Carol Blanchard. Raise your hand. I want to welcome our mayor, Cynthia Connor, over here. I want to welcome our vice commander, Bill Orr. And Commander Dennis Powell was going to come. I don't know if he might not be here yet, but he's coming too. And I want to welcome all of our members and our guests. And I want to welcome our color guard from Newport Beach, American Legion 291. Yes. So now, to begin, I'm going to invite up our chaplain, Steve Thomason, to give our invocation.
Let us pray. Blessed are you, Lord, creator of the universe, who brings forth bread and wine to our table. Lord, thank you so very much for the breath of life. Lord, for those who gave an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And Lord, for those who were willing to put down their life to do just that. Thank you, Lord, for them. Lord, it's a confusing time right now. We're asking, Lord, for your wisdom that what we defend politically are your values. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to invite now up, I want to have all that are able, will you please stand for the marching on of the National Color Guard, and please remain standing if you are able for the national anthem. And I want to invite Chris Ramirez up here to help lead us all in the national anthem. And I'd like you all to sing. We're not going to have a solo. We're going to have us all sing, okay? And Chris will make her way up here. I know, she's in the back. Here she is. This is Chris Ramirez, our member. In here, I'm going to give her the microphone. Okay. I'm going to give her.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
The national anthem, all sing together. You have the words in your programs.
just in case you need them.
Yes.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Right. Hey. Forward. March.
Thank you, Chris Ramirez. You may be seated. You have a program on your table, and what we're going to be doing next is in honor of the fallen and the missing of our most honorable service members. We're going to have a presentation by Kathy Rath. We have the POW's MIA table, and I'm going to ask Kathy to come up and honor us with this tribute to them.
Ladies and gentlemen, while we are honored to have so many of you present tonight, we would be remiss if we did not pause to remember those who could not be with us. As you enter the hall today, you may have noticed a round table set for one in a place of honor. This table is our way of acknowledging that members of our proud profession of arms are missing from our midst. We call them brothers and sisters. They are unable to be with us this evening, so we remember them. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing purity of their intention to respond to their country's call to arms. Remember. The single rose in the vase reminds us of those families and loved ones of our comrades in arms who have fallen. Remember. The yellow ribbon tied so prominently on the vase represents the love of our country, which inspired them to answer the nation's call. Remember. A slice of lemon is on the plate. The slice of lemon is on the plate to remind us of their bitter fate. Remember. The grains of salt represent the countless tears shed, theirs and ours. Remember. The glass is inverted to symbolize their inability to share today's toast. Remember, the chair is empty, for they are not here. Remember. As a small tribute, I ask that we take a moment of silence as an expression of our gratitude to those who sacrificed for us.
Thank you, Kathy Rath. Kathy's an American Legion Post 257 member and also a member of our club. So thank you, Kathy. Isn't that a moving thing? On the back of our song sheet, I put the POW MIA table for you to have the words. They're quite powerful. Okay, now our next step I'm going to have our keynote speaker, Bill Ring, come up and begin our portion of the meeting. He's our keynote speaker. And Bill joined the Marines upon being accepted into Naval Flight School in Pensacola, Florida in December 1965. He received his Naval Aviator wings in June and was assigned to the Tustin helicopter base to transition into his CH-46 helicopter. So in your program, I put on the inside is a little bit of a brief bio. There wasn't enough room. We would have had to write a book to have Bill's bio be honored. So Bill, would you come up, please, and let us know and your testimony? Yes. Oh, yeah. And I want a picture of him here. Bill, I met Bill in June. I went to a friend of mine is the president of the Saddleback Valley Republican Club, and they had a Marine event because Greg Rath is a Marine and Bill is a Marine. Oh, here. And I met Bill at that time. We actually had a sit at dinner together, and it was kind of a divine appointment because now I feel he's just a perfect person for us to be able to hear from him.
You do know that just the day before Veterans Day is the Marine Corps birthday. So as a Marine, I'm going to be taking a few liberties with that. Before I start, are there any World War II veterans here? Okay. Thank you. You do realize that was the last time this country declared war, which means we win. How about Korea? I'm sure we've got some Korean veterans here. Can't forget Vietnam. And then, of course, there's Desert Storm and 9/11 and everything past that. How many Marines do we have? A few. Army? Oh. You're in Marine territory here. Navy? No Navy. Whoa! Okay. And how about the Air Force? Coast Guard? No Coast Guard. Okay. Well, of course I said Army. So, for those Marines, Semper Fi, every individual who has ever served in the U.S. military has taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God. And this oath has no expiration date. As a Marine, we've generally been recognized as the tip of the spear of our combat force. One doesn't typically join the Marine Corps for any other reason than to be in combat. After Vietnam, the draft was ended, and we became an all-volunteer military. Those of you who have served in the military during Desert Storm, post-9/11, Iraq, and Afghanistan, thank you. You all volunteered. During 1968, 3.5 million were on active duty. Today, approximately 1.3 million, less than 1% of all adults in today's volunteer military. Today, few families have any connection to the military, and veterans, many have become indifferent to the call to serve. High schools and colleges, in decades past, that may have welcomed military recruiters on campus, today don't or are restricted. As a result, many young adults have little or no knowledge of how serving in the military may benefit them and our country for the rest of their lives. As veterans, we share a common bond, having experienced the call to duty. Whether you served in combat or not, we all put our lives in harm's way in the service to our country. And this year is the 50th anniversary of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam and the return of our POWs. And before I begin the bulk of my speech, I just want to make a comment about that table over there. Two of the squadron pilots in my squadron in Vietnam were shot down. The crew chief said they were dead. That was the end of March of 1968. 1,815 days later, they turned up when the POWs were released in Hanoi. 1,800 days in captivity. Okay. Remember, I need that volunteer soon. We were soldiers once and young, and now we're veterans and older. Most of us were the leading edge of the baby boom generation. For many of us, our grandfathers or great uncles were in World War I, fathers or uncles in World War II, perhaps older cousins in Korea. And now comes a war for our generation, Vietnam. Some of us were drafted, about a third. Some of us enlisted. Many didn't want to go to Vietnam, many did. Regardless, we all served. Some of us may have gone over as a unit, at most by themselves. We went as strangers to a strange land and did our job, whatever it was, regardless of the branch of service or which area of South Vietnam you were at, or perhaps some into North Vietnam. We served. It was a time in our lives when strangers were willing to put their life in harm's way to save a fellow Marine, soldier, airman or sailor, black or white, air crew or grunt, didn't make any difference. 240 men were awarded the Medal of Honor, 30 post-Vietnam. The average infantryman in the Pacific during World War II saw about 40 days of combat in 4 years. The average in Vietnam was about 240 days in a 12-month tour due to the helicopter mobility. Some 5,086 helicopters were destroyed during the war in Vietnam. Let me ask you, how many people here have been to the Wall in Washington, D.C.? Any of you been to the new Marine Corps Museum in the front gate of Quantico? One of the helicopters in my squadron is there. And on that wall, there's some 58,220 names. And now I need you to come up here. You're my volunteer. Keep going. 5,000 some helicopters were lost in Vietnam. That's a long list. Pardon? $2,200 helicopter pilots killed in Vietnam.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that, yes.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, huh? The typical draftee was obligated to serve 2 years, long enough to go through boot camp and basic or infantry training, then off to Vietnam for a 12-month tour, 13 months for Marines, to kill the enemy for their country. And we were reminded every night on the evening news when we were showing the kill ratio, kind of like a football game. When thousands of soldiers returned to the United States, many were met by demonstrators, filled with hate and disdain. Many GIs took off their uniforms so not to get harassed. Did our country thank those for their service? Not really. There was no transition back to civilian life, and a VA system that was unprepared for the trauma of combat experienced by returning discharged combat veterans. For years, many Vietnam veterans seldom spoke of Vietnam except to other veterans, until about 30 years ago when groups started reuniting across the country. They say time heals all wounds, but many Vietnam veterans still hide their combat experience from their relatives and their closest friends. Some of us left our blood in Vietnam. As I said, 58,220 lost their lives, whose names are engraved on the wall. When we came home, we came back to an ungrateful nation torn apart over Vietnam. We were blamed by biased news and politicians that never wore the uniform for a war that we lost. Even though the American military, following the Paris Peace Accord in January of 1973, was out of the country for 2 years before the South Vietnamese lost to the Communist North in April of 1975. You know, it's amazing. Johnson was our president. Didn't want to win that war. Good Democrat. Then came Carter, Barack Obama. Now we got Biden. What a disaster. Of the 9 million military personnel who served on active duty during the Vietnam era, 2.7 million Americans served in uniform in Vietnam. 7,484 women, of which 83% were nurses. Yet during the 2000 census, the number of Americans falsely claiming to have served in country was 9.5 million, 14 million in the last census in 2010. Of the 2.7 million Americans that served in Vietnam as of February of 2019, 610,000 ground and air veterans are still alive, 164,000 who served at sea. 50 plus years later, it's common to see Vietnam vets proudly wearing a baseball cap and other numbers, showing their Vietnam service, strangers thanking us for our service. We went as strangers, but we came home as brothers and sisters in arms. We share to this day a common bond, shared only by those who were there. Now, 50 plus years later, we gather here for Veterans Week to honor our men and women who have served our country. Speaking for Vietnam vets and other veterans, we are grateful. Let's not forget the 7,200 that gave their lives during Desert Storm and 9/11, 417,000 in World War II, and 37,000 in Korea who've passed before us. Welcome home. Thank you for your service. I brought up, when the Marine Corps Museum was being built, and one of our squadron helicopters was being brought to be the main part of the Vietnam exhibit, I was being interviewed by a Marine Corps historian, and I still have that email. If any of you would like me to share that with you, it has to do, if you've watched the History Channel, the Military Channel, and you're familiar with Tet, 1968, okay? That was an interesting time. I was there, I was a co-pilot, and there was a place called Khe Sanh. And my squadron was at the airfield at Hue Phu Bai, which was right next to the city of Hue, which was also taken over by the North Vietnamese. And at Khe Sanh, which was just up in the upper corner of South Vietnam, just below the DMZ, just inland from the Laotian border and the Ho Chi Minh Trail, was the Marine base Khe Sanh. That base was surrounded by LZs, hilltops, that the Marines occupied overlooking Khe Sanh. It's estimated some 30,000 North Vietnamese regular army came in, surrounded Khe Sanh, supported by artillery, tanks that came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And those Marines on those hills were stranded. There was no way that they could be resupplied. There was no way that we could get food, water, ammo, get their medevacs out. And what was developed, and it was with our squadron, because we had a brand new 46D, which had more powerful engines, and we were given the mission, which was now known as the Super Gaggles. And what would happen is the night before, anywhere from 6, 8, 10 helicopters would fly up from Phu Bai up to Quang Tri, which is just below the DMZ. We would be there overnight. The next morning, we would be briefed as to what LZ we were going to be going into. Just north of Quang Tri, below the DMZ, was a resupply base called Dang Ha. And this was during the monsoon season. Okay, so you had a cloud cover that was maybe under 1,000 feet. Okay, and we would come up, we'd hook up an external net with supplies, water, ammo. We'd get a radar vector through the clouds up to VFR on top, and you'd see us punching through the overcast one after another. And we'd fly up towards Khe Sanh and orbit 5,000 to 6,000 feet. During that period of time, the A4s, F4s, F8s, A6s, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps would be prepping that area, dropping high explosive bombs, napalm, tear gas, smoke would come in, and when we were given the go-ahead, we would do what's called an auto rotation. Okay, that means that's the fastest way to get down, and we would one after another come down, do a fast stop, drop that external load, because what would happen is mortars would start coming in one after another, and then one person would come back and pick up whatever medevacs there were. So those were known as the Super Gaggles. It enabled our Marines to stay on those LZs, despite what was going on there. Anyway, so that's my story. Any questions? I'd be glad to take any questions anybody might have.
Before we have questions, I am remiss in not reading. I have his brief bio here, but I'd like to read it because he's too humble to do. So he joined the Marine Corps, as I said, upon being accepted into Naval Flight School in Pensacola, Florida in December 1965. He received his Naval Aviator wings in June, was assigned to Tustin Helicopter Base to transition into the CH-46 helicopter. In October 1967, Lieutenant Ring went to Vietnam and flew over 500 combat missions supporting the Marines at both Khe Sanh and Hue City during the 1968 Tet Offensive, as he said. But during that time, he was wounded twice and received a Purple Heart and 4 presidential citations. During one of those missions, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross for bravery and extraordinary achievement. On 12 August 1968, Lieutenant Ring was assigned to support troops in the Phong Duc area. Am I saying that wrong, Bill?
Phong Duc.
Phong Duc area. The landing zone came under intense mortar fire, wounding numerous Marines. First Lieutenant Ring was unhesitant and attempted the medical evacuation of the casualties. He maneuvered his CH-46 helicopter into a fire-swept zone and calmly waited for 5 Marines to embark in Thong Duc to assist in the extraction of the remaining personnel. His courage, superior airmanship, and devotion to duty in face of great personal danger was instrumental in saving 5 of the Marines, keeping in the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and that of the United States service. Bill was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Purple Heart, Air Medals. It has 26 here. He has 26 air medals. He flew 529 combat missions. He also has a Presidential Unit Citations, Combat Action Ribbons, and Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry. As I said, he's an amazing man. So we salute. We're so proud of you, Brill. Yes, let's stand. And thank you for being here. And in Matthew 25:23, well done, good and faithful servant. Now we'll have some Q&A. Yeah, how about anybody have questions? What is your rank?
First lieutenant.
Here, Bill.
First lieutenant. You know, when I joined the Marine Corps, I just turned 20. And the Navy and Marine Corps still had a cadet program. Yet with 2 years of college, you pass the physical, pass the written, but the catch is you had to have a C average. So the deal was you get your wings, you get your commission. So, and as a pilot, rank does not have anything to do with being a pilot in command. So, yeah, I ended up being a senior pilot in my second squadron as a second lieutenant. So it was, but when I actually had put in for transition orders to jets to come back for a second tour, which didn't happen, and I was not interested in going back for a second tour in helicopters. One was enough.
You know, we flew 529 combat missions. I can't imagine that. Was that in 1 year? Was that how much time?
That's in 13 months, and there's plenty of other pilots that have more air medals and more combat missions than I was, because I was also a squadron test pilot.
Wow.
So it was not unusual. Okay.
You know, Bill, we often, it's true, my dad never talked about what happened in France during World War II. When he and his brother-in-law got together, they would talk together, but never with the family. So your explanation was just such a vivid picture. I just really appreciated that. And it helps us who aren't veterans to understand more of what you all went through. Because I think very few, like you said, talked about Vietnam.
And still, you know, those of you who have been in combat, those memories are still with you.
Now, you know, we're addressing a lot of PTSD today. I imagine there was a lot of PTSD in those early wars. World War II, Jim was in World War II. But was there help for PTSD? Did they call it PTSD at that time?
Nope. And PTSD stays with you the rest of your life. You just have to learn how to live with it. I know.
Any tips on how you cope with that after all that?
If any of you are experiencing that and you're a combat veteran, seek out the vet center, the closest ones in Mission Viejo.
Great, thank you. Any questions, anybody? Yes, back there. I'll come back. Wait a minute, Kim.
Mr. Ring, could you please tell us a little bit more about the Marine Museum? I'd like to hear more about it.
You know, most of what the Marine Corps gets is hand-me-downs, I think, from the Army. That museum, that Marine Museum, is absolutely first class. And it takes you through the history of the Marine Corps. When we went through there, we've been there, my wife and I, and we went back there for the opening of the museum, and then we went back there again for the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. with my nephew and his family. It really is extraordinary. We went through the Korean exhibit. It's dark, it's cold, and you can see the tracers flying. You get into the Vietnam exhibit, and as you get into, you have a chance to walk through one of my squadron helicopters through the side door, the Purple Foxes, known as the Give a Shit Squadron. Okay. And as you go through that helicopter and you go off the back ramp, you're in a 360-degree dome. You're on Hill 881 South, overlooking Quezon. It's hot, it's humid, and remember the old series, You Are There? You are there. When we went in there, I was there. It really is a wonderful, wonderful museum. It's right at the front gate of Quantico, outside of Washington, D.C. No, it's not. Yes, ma'am.
There are so many wonderful veterans that we have, and yet, because of a fire, many of the records have been destroyed. Do you know how to recover or establish some of these records for the veterans that have their records destroyed, because they need to have their families wish to remember them in that regard?
You know, I believe my records were destroyed in St. Louis, where the Marine Corps records were held. There was a fire. You know, every veteran, when they get out of the service, they get a form called a DD-214. That DD-214 really is the history of what you've done. In my case, it's my medals. It was what I did. It was what I did in the Marine Corps, aircraft I flew, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot you can learn if you can, and you can apply for that. You can apply for your loved ones, your whoever, even if they're deceased. You can put in and ask for a copy of their DD-214. And by the way, that DD-214, as far as funeral expenses, as far as contacting, like for getting a flag, et cetera, that's a very important piece of paper, that DD-214.
Thank you. Would you share with us your opinion of the current state of our military readiness?
Yeah. I don't know if I want to go there. You know, I don't know what kind of language y'all are used to, but in the Marine Corps, I can tell you it's pretty fucked up. You know, let's face it. Let's face it. Every time that man opens his mouth, the world sees how weak our commander-in-chief is. And who would elect a person like this to run the biggest country, the biggest company in the world, and the best military? And it is encouraging our enemies to what's happening right now. And the sooner we can get them out, the sooner the better. And God. You got it. Yes, ma'am. Who am I working for?
What are you doing now?
Well, I'm still working. I'll be 78 in about 3 weeks. We keep talking about retiring. I manage money. I've been in the investment business for 40 years. I've been managing money for 27 years. I learned how to spend money in the Marine Corps. Yes? You're here. Yes.
Wait a minute. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't do that. Oh,
I'm sorry.
That's it.
No politics. Anybody else?
That's all right.
Any more questions?
Questions or comments?
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Wonderful. God bless you. Okay, well, we're going to... Oh, yeah. Man needs water. I want to say there's a gentleman over there against the wall. His name is John Pearson. And John Pearson and Bill are good friends. Bill, you want to tell them about John? Goofy.
John was one of my instructors at Tustin before I went to Vietnam. And I remember I was just mentioning to John, and John has a book out called The Bronco Pilot. John was a helicopter pilot on his first tour, and then he had a chance to fly the OV-10 Bronco on his second tour in Vietnam. And I was just mentioning, I said the one thing I remember, we went on a night instruction flight, and we were flying. Remember, it was called Trabuco Flats, now Rancho Santa Margarita. And it was that night. We flew down, did some practice landings down by Pendleton. As we cut across Pendleton, at night, they were doing a live fire at one of the ranges, and I'm going, wow, look at all those tracers. And John says, you'll see plenty of those where you're going soon enough. Thanks, John.
I got to tell you a funny story while we're waiting. It's time. We can serve lunch at any time now. I went to the American Legion dinner last Thursday over at Clubhouse 1, and Vice Commander Bill Orr invited Patty Zingaro and myself. And I met John Pearson. He went there, and I got chatting with him and telling him about Bill coming to today. And he said, "Oh, Chicken Man." So I emailed Bill, and he said, "Oh yeah, Goofy. That's from Goofy." So this gentleman is Goofy, and this guy's Chicken Man, and I'm sure they have a story. Do you want to tell that story? Yes.
Anybody here from Chicago? Well, you may remember there was a famous AM station. I forget what it's called, KLOS or something, or KLS. And in 1968, there was a guy in Chicago. He had a skit, and it was called The Adventures of the Chicken Man. And in our helicopters, we had a radio that was rarely ever used, but you could tune it in to the Armed Forces radio station. And I had a division, I was leading a division of 4 helicopters one day, and I had them all tune in. I says, here, it's the Adventures of the Chicken Man. And that's the last I heard of it until one day I was doing a test flight near Da Nang, and I was in the pattern doing touch and goes. And so everybody in that area is on the tower frequency. And obviously some of my fellow pilots were in the pattern or coming in, and they heard my voice, and all of a sudden one keys, "Hey, it's the Chicken Man." Another one goes, "Bok, bok, bok, bok. He's everywhere, he's everywhere." And to this day, you know, it never has left. My squadron pilots still know me as the Chicken Man.
Isn't that great to know that amidst all the terror and the horror that they had some comic relief? I think they really needed it. John, we're so grateful for you to come today. He can't stay for lunch. He's got to go to the airport or something. So thank you, John. Did you want to say something, John? Yeah.
I was nicknamed Goofy in college because the quarterback was the goofiest guy I ever saw in my life, looking that way. And he said, "I'm going to nickname you Goofy so I don't get called Goofy." I tried to leave it behind when I went to flight school in Pensacola, and I was playing football there also. And the first day of practice, this guy comes on the field and yells at me across the field, "Hey, Goofy!" And like he said, those names never go away. Okay? It was a teammate of mine from the University of New Mexico who is now an ensign in the Navy and on the same football team again. And so there you go. I've stuck with it for life. I am goofy, but not so much.
Thank you, Bill. John, thank you, John. We're honored to have you today. Now I'd like to invite Vice Commander Bill Orr up from the American Legion 257. I want to introduce him so that all of you know who he is. He's a wonderful gentleman. He's a good friend of mine. And here he is. And Bill, I want you to maybe say a few words.
How are you today?
I'm great.
Are you hungry? Are you hungry yet?
No, I'm not hungry.
How many people here are from Post 257? 257 Post 2. Yeah. Congratulations them. Honor them. I wanted to let you all know that Post 257 on December 28th, 5 o'clock, Clubhouse 1 is having a special New Year's party for all veterans. We hope you can come. Remember that. The 28th, 5 p.m., Clubhouse 1. Thank you so much.
John wants to take our picture. Come here. And we'll send that email out to our members and to all the people here. Okay. Bill, thank you, and God bless you. Does a wonderful job. Vice Commander. Okay, everyone. Well, it's 12:20, and if anyone doesn't have any other questions, I'll just let you chat and enjoy your time together and have a wonderful lunch, okay?